again, everyone, and welcome back yet again to LearnLinuxTV. I'm over 800 videos in on this channel at this point, and I could barely believe that I've created that many videos over the years. Wow! You guys are awesome, and thank you so much for your support. Now, you guys have been asking me to do a video on SSH key management for quite a while now, and today I'm going to give you the first video that's going to go over exactly that. In this video, I'll set up a hypothetical scenario where we are the Linux administrator for 3 different companies, and we need to understand how do we manage keys between the 3 companies. I mean, should we use the same key for each? Well, no, of course not. And we'll get into that here in a moment, but the point is, we have 3 companies, we have 3 different keys. What do? We need to talk about SSH key management, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. Now, SSH keys are a great way to connect to your Linode server. Linode is a cloud server provider that is Linux focused. They're all about Linux. And if you don't already have an account, you can get a new account with $100 in credit to set up your very own cloud Linux servers. And Linode is sponsoring this video as they have many others, and I really appreciate it. Their service is awesome. They have features such as Kubernetes, block storage. They even have horizontal scaling now, which is really cool. Definitely check out Linode. You won't regret it. And they're also especially awesome when it comes to creating a cloud server for going through these tutorials. It's a great way to do it. So set yourself up with a Linode server, go through the tutorials. You're going to have a lot of fun. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into the subject of SSH key management. So here I am on my laptop, and this is actually a screen recording directly from my laptop. And what I'm going to do is show you guys how to manage multiple keys for multiple servers. For this video, I've created 3 servers for 3 hypothetical companies, and those companies are Acme, Shinra, and Skynet. I don't know why I decided to name the latter 2 after evil companies. That's kind of weird, but I digress. If you know the fandoms that those latter 2 servers are from, let me know in the comments down below. Anyway, I'll be using the same 3 servers that I used in my SSH config file video. Definitely check out that video if you haven't already done so. I'll leave a card for that right about here. And in that video, I showed you guys how to simplify your SSH commands by storing some of those parameters in a config file to make the whole process easier. So definitely check out that video if you haven't already done so. In addition to that, I also have an entire video that's a guide for OpenSSH. I'll leave a card for that right about here. And that's an in-depth video that goes a lot deeper into SSH in general. So if you don't already know how to use OpenSSH, definitely check out that video. You should have some decent understanding by the time you get to the end of that video. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into SSH key management. Now right here on this laptop, I have an SSH key already, and I don't want to lose that. What I also don't want to do is use that same SSH key for every server. If I was to do that, and that key was ever to leak out, then that means the attacker could get into any SSH server that I had access to. That would not be good. So the first order of business is that we need to create an SSH key for each of the companies that we're going to be connecting to. If I list the storage for my .ssh directory that's inside my home directory, I have several files there. Right here we have the config file, the very same SSH config file that we created during the SSH config file video. We also have this file right here, id_rsa, and we have the same name ending in .pub. This is a private key, if you didn't already know, and this is a public key. Now, if I was to create a new key and I leave the defaults, it's going to overwrite the keys here, and we definitely don't want that to happen. So we're going to be creating new keys in this video. I also have this known host file right here, which I'm not going to go into detail of. It basically keeps track of SSH fingerprints for servers you've already connected to. But our main area of focus is going to be the SSH keys that you see here. And also, we're going to update the config file later in the video because I'm going to show you guys how to make it automatically use the proper key for the server. So let's go ahead and create another SSH key. For that, we have the ssh-keygen command. That's the standard command that we'll use to create an SSH key pair. And then --C, we're going to add a comment to the file. And I'll add the comment of j-laptop. This last option is optional. but I'm just giving you guys an example. Now you don't have to follow along and create a key right now. I'll be creating a stronger key here in a moment. This is just an example to create an SSH key in general. Anyway, I'll press enter. And right away we see a problem. This is the default location where it wants to create the key. If I was to press enter without typing anything at all, then it's going to overwrite this path because it's going to assume that I want to create a key in the default path. I shouldn't do that if I already have a key in that path with that same name, because again, it'll be overwritten. I'll still keep the same path though, /home/my username, / and then .ssh, and inside there, I'm going to give it a different name. I'll just call it key2. Again, you don't have to follow along with this part. We'll be creating the key a better way here in a moment. This is just an example. But what I've done so far is I've given it a different name, so that way it's not going to overwrite the key that I have there already. Next, it wants me to enter a passphrase. And you should always include a passphrase because it's going to increase the strength of your key by quite a bit actually, because without that passphrase, even if somebody was to steal that key, they won't be able to use it because they won't be able to unlock it without that passphrase. So I entered in a passphrase, and I'll do it again. And we're done. So now if I list the storage of the .ssh directory, I'll use the -L option, I prefer that anyway. You can see we have several files here, but we also have this new file right here and also this new file. So we have two new files. Anytime you create an SSH key, you get a public and a private key. This one right here is the public key. And the reason I know this is because it ends in .pub. This one is the private key. It does not end in .pub. Now, this key right here, I can show you guys and it's no problem at all. And there's the contents of my public key. Now the private key, this one right here, the one that does not end in .pub, every key you create has a matching key pair, a public and a private key. You should absolutely never, I repeat, never allow anybody to see the contents of the private key. It's called a private key for a reason. And most of this I went over in my previous videos. I'm just giving you guys a refresher. But there's no problem in showing you guys the content of this key right here because what I showed you guys was the public key. That's fine. But what I'm going to do actually is remove the keys that I've just created. I'm just going to type rm, and I want to remove key 2, and then I'll put a star there. I want to get rid of those keys because I want to create them a better way. And as you can see, we're down to the key pair that we had originally, so we're back to the starting point. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to create the first key, and this one is going to be for Acme, and I'm going to be creating it a different way. I'm still going to use ssh-keygen because that is the tried and true command for creating an SSH key. But this time I'm going to add the -T option for type, and the type of key that I want to create is an ED25519 key. Without going too much into cryptography, a key of this type is cryptographically more secure than the default, which is why I'm going with this. But it's not the only benefit though. I'll show you the other benefit here in a moment. Again, I'll give it a comment. And then I'll include the comment again of j-laptop. I'll press enter. And this time it wants to create the key in the same directory, but with a different name. As you can see, there's a completely different naming style when it comes to this key right here. If I was to accept the default, because I don't already have a key of this type, it will not overwrite the existing one, but I want to give it a better name so that way I know what exactly it's for. So I'm going to give it the same directory. And what I'm going to do is call it acme_key. Simple enough, I'll press enter. And for the passphrase, we definitely want that. So I'll type that in, and again. And now it's telling us that it's created the key. And as you can see, we have acme_key and acme_key.pub. So we have the private key and the public key for the key pair that we've just created. Now let's take a look at this key right here so I can show you guys the difference between the two keys, so that way you'll understand the other benefit. As you can see, there's a lot of text right here. This is an RSA key, and it's quite large. Now let's check out the other key. So here's the other public key, and it's just a single line. Believe it or not, this key type right here is more secure than the RSA key type, and it's also shorter too. So in my opinion, there's really no downside. Years ago, it used to be the case that this key type wasn't supported on every Linux distribution, but nowadays it is supported on every Linux distribution, at least everything that I've tried, and considering that support for this key type was added several major releases ago, it's probably unlikely that your distribution won't support this key type. Since it's more secure and the resulting key is actually shorter, I don't see any reason not to use this key type. So now we have a key for Acme, that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and create a key for the other servers as well. Because I'm lazy, I'm just bringing up the previous command right here. I'll press enter. And again, I'll use the same path. And what I'm going to do is call this one shinra_key, just like that. I'll press enter. Again, I'll type a passphrase. I'll type it in again. Now we have another key. And let's create a key for the third server that we'll be connecting to today. So again, same command. I'm going to give it the same path yet again. And I'll call this one Skynet_key. And now that one's created. As you can see, we now have a dedicated key for each of the servers that we're going to be connecting to. But I haven't actually associated any of these keys with the target servers yet, and that's actually the next thing that we'll do. So, to associate a key with a server, we're going to use the ssh-copy-id command, -i. We'll give it the path to our public key. And the server that I want to connect to is going to be acme.learnlinux.cloud. So what this command should do is actually copy that public key over to that server, so that way I can use it going forward. Let's see what happens. So I'll type in the password for that connection. And it's telling me that the number of keys that have been added is 1. So it looks like we're good. Let's go ahead and repeat this process for the other servers. I'll type ssh-copy-id, again -i. This time we're going to use the Shinra public key, and that server is actually using the username of root, and the fully qualified domain name is shinra.learnlinux.cloud. And actually this is at a different port as well, so we're going to need to add the -p option, 2222. You probably don't need to do that on your end. But anyway, I'll press enter. I'll type in the password. And now it's telling me that that key has been added as well. So next we'll add the last of the keys. We'll add the Skynet key to the Skynet server. So again, it's ssh-copy-id, then the Skynet public key, and the username for that server is admin. Typed in the fully qualified domain name. Let's go ahead and get that key copied over. And now it's added. So how do we connect to a server and tell it what key we want to use for the connection? I now have 4 keys. I have the original key that was already there, but I also have a key pair for each of the additional servers as well because we created them in this video. So here's what the syntax looks like. I'm going to type ssh-i, and that's how we tell it that we want to use a specific key. And the key that I want to use for this one, let's go with Acme. So we're going to use the private key. And I'll simplify the hostname down to Acme because, again, we created an SSH config file that includes all the default parameters, so I can simplify the command down to this. So I'll press enter. And now it's asking me to unlock the key. This is the passphrase that we've created earlier. So I'll type that in. And now I'm in. I'm connected to the server. I'll disconnect. And we'll try another one, for example. So ssh-i. We'll use the Shinra key and we will connect to the Shinra server. I'm unlocking the key just like last time. And now I'm into that server. That's pretty cool. We're already using SSH keys to get into the server, and we have a different key for each server, which is pretty cool. Now, having a passphrase is really useful, but it can also be a bit on the tedious side as well because you have to type that in every time. Let's switch gears and talk about the SSH agent, which allows us to actually cache the key, so that way we don't have to enter it in every single time. We'll only need to enter the passphrase once per session, and that'll simplify things even more. Now, what we're going to do is start the SSH agent, and to do that, I'll type eval, then a $ with parentheses. Inside the parentheses, I'm going to start the SSH agent. So that's what the command looks like. Now, without getting too involved into the mechanics of the underlying shell, we basically want to run this program right here, and we want it to stay running in the background. So that's what this is going to do for us. We're going to run the SSH agent in the background. We want to keep that alive, so that way it'll make sure that the key stays unlocked for this session, and that'll help us not have to enter the passphrase in every single time. So I'll press enter, and here we can see we have a process ID of 2749. If you're curious, we could run ps-aux, and we could grep for 2749, just like that. And here we have the process for the SSH agent running in the background. That's pretty cool. So now that we have the SSH agent running in the background, how do we actually use it to unlock our key? Well, what we could do is run the ssh-add command, and this will help us add a key to the agent. So we'll give it one of our keys. So for example, .ssh, and I'll give it the Shinra key. Now it wants us to enter the passphrase, which I'll do. And now that's added. Let's add the other ones as well. There's Acme. We'll type in the passphrase. Now that one's added. And then finally, we'll add the passphrase for Skynet as well. I'll type in the password. And now that's added. Now check this out. I could simply run SSH and then Acme, just like that. And I'm in. No passphrase, nothing. Just simply SSH and Acme, that's it, I'm in. I can do the same thing with Shinra, for example. And I'm in. And now SSH Skynet, why not? And as an aside, the reason why I'm able to simplify the name down to just Skynet is because of the SSH config file. If it wasn't for that file, I would have had to type the fully qualified domain name, which is that one right there. But because we have an SSH config file, we don't need to do that. We can just press enter just like that, and we're in. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that if I was to close this shell, then the SSH agent goes away. And the next time I open up a terminal window, I'm going to have to unlock the key again after I start the SSH agent. But at least from this point forward, as long as I don't close this particular shell, I'll be able to use the SSH agent for all the servers. Now let's go ahead and take the SSH config file to another level. I'll just use nano, doesn't really matter. Let's open up that config file, and here we have it. And again, this is the same config file that we've created in the SSH config file video, but what I'm going to do right now is add some additional options to it and make it even better. So what I'm going to do is just go all the way here to the end. Let's add another line. And what I'm going to do is type identity file, uppercase I and uppercase F. So I'll add the name of the private key for that one. Going to do the same thing right here. And then I'll do the same thing for this one as well. And that should be it for this file. So what I'm going to do is save it. Control O and then enter in the case of nano, and then Control X to exit out. And now we have an updated config file. Now to make this even better, what I'm going to do is actually close this terminal window. And obviously that means that my SSH agent closed as well. Let's open up another terminal so we have a brand new session. And then we can see how this is actually going to help us out. Now before we connect to a server, I'm going to create a new instance of the SSH agent. And I'll just use the same command as last time. And there it is. Now normally I would have used the ssh-i command to load the key, that way it's added to the agent, but I'm going to skip that. What I'm going to do instead is just simplify the SSH command down to SSH and then Acme, just like that, and I'll press enter. Now it's asking me for the passphrase for the key, but I didn't even tell it what key I wanted it to use, but it somehow knows that the Acme key is the one that I need to use. How is that? Well, that's because we added the location of the key to the config file. That's how it knew. Let's go ahead and unlock it. And now I'm in. So, as a quick refresher, we have our SSH config file, and because I added the identity file option, it knew right where to find the key. So I didn't have to bother to even tell it. That's pretty cool. So let's test out the other servers as well. Make sure they work. So we'll SSH into Skynet. And we're in. Try the same thing for the Shinra server. And we're in. It was that simple. So because I added the identity file line to each of these, I was able to tell it which key I wanted to use for the connection without actually having to tell it that because the instructions are right here in the file. And that makes it a heck of a lot easier to know which key goes to which. You just add it to this file, and then the SSH client does the rest. So now we have a different key for each server. That's pretty cool. So there you go. I hope you guys found this video helpful, and if you did, please consider clicking that like button because that's going to help YouTube know that you like this video and that it should be served to other people. That would really help me out. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already done so. I have some awesome videos coming very soon. Thank you so much for watching.